Good morning, everybody. This is Justin Dunaway coming at you live from Portland, Oregon. I'm faculty with the Institute of Clinical Excellence, and today I want to talk a little bit about the definition of pain and kind of where that gets us from a clinical aspect. But before we get rolling, I want a quick shout out to Athletico Physical Therapy for hosting us in Oak Brook, Illinois at their Learning Center for the Total Spine Thrust Manipulation course over the weekend. It was a great group of highly skilled clinicians. We had an absolute blast, and I know Jeff, Morgan, Adam, and I all had a really good time. So if anybody from Athletico is listening this morning, thank you guys very much for having us out, and look forward to seeing you again in the future. So today I want to dive into what I called understanding the what but hunting for the why of pain. And kind of the impetus behind talking about this today is there was a new paper that came out in the Pain Journal called Reconsidering the International Association for the Study of Pain's Definition of Pain. So this is just a review and commentary kind of calling for a new update to the definition of pain. Which currently, the most widely accepted definition of pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage, or described in terms of such. And this was given to us by the IASP, International Association for the Study of Pain, back in 1979, and has been the most widely used and recognized definition in our research and clinical practice of pain. And why everybody likes it is because it's kind of the first definition that starts to pull in not just sensory but emotional as well, and doesn't just talk about it in objective terms, but it's an experience. And this experience is associated with not just actual tissue damage but potential tissue damage as well, which means we have the potential to have pain in the absence of damage. And the pain itself is described in terms of such damage. So that's where we're at with the definition. And the authors of this paper, Cohen et al., they feel that there's some things lacking. And the paper's kind of neat because it goes into lots of different competing definitions and some of the pros and cons with all of them, but it really just kind of elucidates the difficulty with our ability to come up with an all-encompassing definition that's going to capture everybody's unique experience of pain. One of the biggest issues that two of the biggest issues the authors have with the current definition of pain is we've still got a really strong link to tissue damage, right? The word damage is in there 3 times. And even though from an application standpoint, we're trying to sever this link between sever the link between the experience of pain and actual damage. We've got the Cartesian model of pain back from the 1600s that we've been trying to walk away from as we learn more and more about the physiology of pain, but our current definition still feels really tied to that. So that's one of their main issues. The other issue is pretty interesting as well. They feel that the current definition, there's this strong, while it recognizes pain as being subjective, there's this strong need to objectify it through an observer. So even though this is your experience, I as a clinician have to qualify it. I as a clinician I come in this position of privilege, and I have to essentially judge your experience of pain to put it into my chart and move forward. All right, there's some really cool, powerful quotes in this paper that kind of really got me thinking. But the first one is simply this: to have pain is to have certainty. To hear about pain is to have doubt. And that right there kind of really, really casts some doubt on this ability for us as an observer to quantify and judge a person's experience of pain. They know exactly what's going on, but we have to kind of take that description and turn it into something concrete. Jeremy Fletcher, this is rampant. Absolutely. So this next quote is this is the one that really kind of dug into me a bit. And it's a quote and kind of an extrapolation from an author back in 1963, but it just says this: just try, in a real case, to doubt someone else's fear or pain. He is in pain. And not because we have proof of the presence of pain, but simply because in the process of being a fellow human being, we cannot doubt the reality of another's experience. And that's so on point and so absolutely powerful. We have an internal context. One of the things that drives the experience of pain is a black box. We have no idea what's going on inside the cortical activation of another human being in front of us. The only thing we have, the window into the actual experience, is what the patients are telling us. right? So the authors of this paper, after going through all the different definitions and the pluses and minuses of everything, they suggest we change the definition to simply this. Pain is a mutually recognizable somatic experience that reflects a person's apprehension of threat to their bodily or existential integrity. That's a pretty interesting definition. I think it's going to take a lot of kind of thought to unpack exactly what that means, but it certainly divorces itself from this focus on pain, and it really kind of ties into this is about the patient's experience, the patient's sense of well-being, safety, and their apprehension of threat to that sense of well-being, whether it be physical or existential. It's a pretty philosophically deep but powerful definition. But really what I think it draws attention to as we start to dive into trying to come up with an idea of what pain is for everybody, that's probably a tough order to fill. I don't know that we're ever going to come up with a really solid definition that encompasses everybody's experience of pain. But as we start to talk about this stuff, it really draws attention to the difficulty. And that's the point. That the thing that makes this the most difficult, not the what, it's the why. It's the why behind the patient's pain. And that's the thing that we absolutely need to be diving into. All right, so when a patient walks in the door and tells us that their back hurts and it's a 10 out of 10 pain, we struggle with this. We struggle with this mismatch of trying to understand, because we take their experience and we try to make them pigeonhole it into a singular number in a couple one-word descriptions. It's 10 out of 10, sharp, achy, dull, nagging, throbbing, whatever. And now what we try to do is take those couple words that they gave us, create what that experience would mean in my head as the observer, and then match it back onto theirs and then judge whether what they just said makes sense to what a 10 out of 10 aching pain would mean to me, right? So there's this massive mismatch as we try to take their experience, turn it into our own, and then use that to judge. So what do we go from there? Well, it's another really cool paper, and I know that I've mentioned this in a couple previous PT on Ice, is the Coghill's inter-individual differences in the experience of pain. Well, they just took a bunch of people, and they all gave them the same noxious thermal stimulus, had everybody rate their pain, and what did we get? We got 1 out of 10 all the way to 10 out of 10, which is absolutely what we expect in the clinic. But at the same time, he shot a functional MRI, and he focused on the anterior cingulate cortex, he focused on the prefrontal cortex, and he focused on the somatosensory cortex, some of the areas that are going to light up during a painful experience. And what he found is that patients that said 1, 2, 3 out of 10, the cortex barely lit up. The patients that said 8, 9, 10 out of 10, their cortex lit up like a Christmas tree. And so what Coghill said is that from a cortical activation standpoint, the subjective experience of pain is valid and reliable. And from the clinic, it's really the only thing we have to understand what's going on in the patient's head, right? So it's not that we have symptom magnifiers and people with high pain tolerances. We have people that their brains react differently to similar stimulus. So what do we do with that information, right? So here we are. We know that yes, pain isn't damage, and yes, it's more existential than it is nociceptive, and yes, it's really going to be difficult to figure out what exactly it is or how we can define it for everybody. But when the patient walks in the door with that number, with that saying, hey, you said that I have to mark on this sheet that my pain is a number. So the number I'm giving you is 10 out of 10 and it's achy. Wonderful, Jim. That's what I needed to know for my piece of paper. Now what I need to know for you and me is this. What does that 10 out of 10 mean? You get kind of a weird look, but like seriously, okay, so your pain is a 10 out of 10, and historically, you see this in the Facebook threads all the time. Somebody says a patient walks in with a 12 out of 10 pain. Well, no, Jim, it's a 10 out of 10 scale, so it can't be 12. And Jim says, okay, fine, it's 10. Well, Jim, it can't be 10 because 10 is the worst pain imaginable, and you walked in the building. If you were the worst pain imaginable, you'd have to be in the hospital. Do we need to call an ambulance? Okay, fine, it's a 6. Right? So we're trying to pigeonhole them into the experience that makes sense in our head. But none of that matters, right? What we need to do is now take that information. We're going to take that pain scale and reverse engineer it, right? Because what they're trying to do with that number is describe their experience. Describe what's going on in their life that made them walk in the door and give you that number that we forced them to give us. So let's take that number and work it backwards so we can start to shed some light on that black box's internal context and figuring out what's going on inside their head that makes their experience what it is. Because that's what's important for driving clinical practice. So when they come in and they say it's 10 out of 10, that's fantastic, Jim. That's in the chart. Now tell me why. Why is it a 10 out of 10? What do you think's going on that makes that pain, makes you describe the pain that way? Why do you feel the number is what it is? And more importantly, because your pain because you told me it was a 10, how does that affect your life? What does that mean outside of this clinic? What are you doing differently on a day-to-day basis? What would it take for you to feel like when you walked in the door, you could say it was an 8 or a 6? I think I know in my head what we want to do to start changing that, but I don't care about that. Jim, what I need to know is, what do you believe needs to change for this number to move? And then I got that information, and then I'm going to flip that as well. Okay, cool. So if you came in, we changed these things, and now your pain is an 8 or a 6, how would your life look different? What would you do differently tomorrow if you were a 6 instead of a 10? How about next week? How about next month? And then we can use these things, these questions, to reverse engineer that number, to really dive deeply into the experience. And then from there, we can set up a evaluation, treatment progression, and goals that make sense to a patient that's going to drive compliance, resilience, and understanding about their pain. Instead of judging their pain, let's validate it by saying, cool, 10 out of 10, that makes perfect sense. Now explain it to me. So here we are. I think that this. I'm going to post links to that Coghill paper. I'm going to post you some links to the paper on reconsidering pain, reconsidering the definition of pain. I think it's a really cool read, just because it gets you thinking about pain on a more philosophical level, which I think is super important. But from the clinical aspect, I think when the patient comes in, and this is an interesting challenge because early on, patients, when you start flipping the script and asking the patients to explain what's going on, they look at you kind of sideways. But we also got to remember that patients in persistent pain have had a decade of people doing to them and telling them what's wrong. We have slowly stripped away their comfort with internal locus of control, slowly stripped away their comfort with being in the driver's seat. So aside from diving in with these questions and really starting to get a feel for the deeper experience of their pain, we're also giving them a little bit of greater exposure to being back in the driver's seat. All right, you tell me what you think is going on. You tell me what we think we need to do next. I'm going to put you in the driver's seat every chance I get to get you more comfortable with being in control, because at some point, you and I are going to separate, and you're going to have to run the show without me. Cool. So today, this week in the clinic, what I really want you to do is when the patient comes in with that number, just use that. That's just a brief touch point. Use that to open the door, to dive in deep and get a rich understanding of their experience of pain, and then use that information to really guide your treatment and guide your goals and progression. That's the way forward with this whole concept of pain. Yeah, understanding the what of pain is going to be important, but really the why behind the experience from a clinician end, that's what changes practice. All right, cool. Everybody, that's what I got for today. If you guys are interested in this stuff and want to hear more about it, we do, Institute of Clinical Excellence does have a persistent pain management course. It's online. It's 8 weeks. It starts May 7th, the next round. So if you're interested, you can check it out at the link below or on www.ice.physio. Otherwise, look forward to chatting again. Have a great day, everybody.